Welcome back to Game Devs Play Games, where we play games to talk game design. We are back with more Civilization 6. Might have been a little close to the microphone.
Yeah,
Well, that's all better now.
Just gotta do it. Next turn, and let's see if I get attacked. Who knows? Yeah, Carthage, you go after them barbs.
You know, I will say, Civ has never been a game that's been friendly about color blindness for me.
That's fair. Actually, I know that Nick has had some issues here and there. They have done something a little smarter. They do a double border now. So, you can see
I thought that was like
colors.
a shadow.
No.
To be totally honest, I did not realize that was red. Is that red?
It's like a brownish red. It's mostly brown.
I thought it was gray. I thought it was a shadow.
There's brown here and then some white there. So, yeah, there's that.
It helps, I guess.
And then these guys only have a single dotted line.
Oh, okay.
So they're a little more friendly than they were before, but I mean,
It's a hard obstacle to tackle.
I was gonna say, when you have like 10 civs on the board, it's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So cool. We're looking at a warrior right now. Where he's just chilling out. He's like, "Hey man, what's going on?" And then there's a spearman over here, and so it tells you in the bottom right, your guy's on the right side. Mm-hmm. My warrior's on the right, and their spearman is on the left. And it's saying that they're stronger than me, so they're going to crush me if I try to fight them.
It's good to know.
So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to run back with my tail between my legs, and we're going to start exploring. Let's go here. So he's going to start auto-moving there, and the game will let me know once he gets there, which is really nice so that I don't have to sit there and focus on 800 units at once.
Good day, it's an honor to meet you in person. It seems great. Minds do attract each other after all.
So here's Pedro. Pedro II from Brazil. So right off the bat, you meet him and you could be like, thanks for the introduction, but I don't have time to talk to you. Or you can be like, hey, we visit city and sample hospitality. And he's like, sure, you have my gratitude. Next turn, he's probably going to be like, hey, do you want an envoy? I'll give you some of my fancy food. And basically, that's just a way of saying he's trying to be friendly with me. Cool. Advancement toward writing because I met another civ. So basically, you can try to be friendly with people right off the bat. And in doing so, you get what's called diplomatic visibility. So, access level, rather. So, like, right now, it's like none, right? But if I had a relationship with him, I would start getting gossip. And gossip would be like things like, you know what? Pedro recently built a water mill. And I'd be like, oh, that's cool, I guess. Then eventually it'd be like, Pedro recently sent a spy somewhere. And you'd be like, oh, no way.
Hell no.
And then you can send spies into his area and then find out what he's doing. And then eventually your visibility on them can get so good if you're spying on them that you know that they're making a nuke.
That's where I was gonna draw an example from. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Keep your enemies close kind of thing.
So one thing that we were talking about, what did I want to talk about before? Oh, some weird design decisions that Civ 5 made that Civ 6 had like realized, and they were like, no, we're gonna do it better this time. Number one, the civics tree, right? Previously, culture just kind of like, it would allow you to expand your borders, and then that's kind of all it did. I feel like there was something, I don't remember, but it was like, it didn't do a whole lot, but it was like nice to have anyway. In this game, on the other hand, there's a whole civics tree, so immediately there's a thing there. And what that allowed is, you gained faith before in Civ 5, and that faith would allow you to purchase, or would allow you to expand your holy influence over the world. Now there's actually civics trees to help you do that, and there's still faith, so they once again tied into each other. We were talking about spies before. Before in Civ 5, when you hit like the Renaissance area, you just get a spy. It'd be like, here's a spy. You're like, what do I do with it? And they're like, I don't know, go figure it out. And this
go spy on someone, duh.
Yeah. And this one's like, congratulations, you got to the right civic. You can now spy on people. You're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And it's like, here's all the information. You just send people to things and spy on people's districts. One thing we'll talk about later. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks for actually explaining something to me. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is explained to you, especially the Civilopedy is a little lacking at the moment, but they're getting there. They're getting there. So
That's fair.
I'm going to build a slinger here because I'm excited that slingers are a unit now.
Yeah.
Slingers influenced the world throughout for many, many years. The fact that slingers didn't exist until now boggles my mind.
In Civ games, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I actually didn't know that.
yeah, it just kind of weren't a thing. So here's Pedro.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Animal husbandry.
I love this quote.
If there are no dogs in heaven, then when I die, I want to go where they went.
So good. My favorite quote is from Rifling. The quote is, don't criticize a rifleman until you've walked a mile in his shoes. That way, he has no shoes, and you are far out of range. It's the best quote.
That's beautiful.
I will say this, though. If you don't read the biographies of the people, because you can go to your we can talk about this real quick. You can go to Civilopedia and like check out like great people.
There's a lot of reading you can do.
There's a lot. It'd be like, oh man, who is this guy? Who's Gaius Duilius? I don't know how to pronounce it. And then here's a whole biography in case you're curious about him. If you want to feel good about your life, don't read these, because these people, all of them, they are great people and they put you to shame. It's just embarrassing. So what I did there is I built a builder, and before there were workers, and you'd set them on auto, and they would just do things.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be like, oh, okay, cool, they're going to improve tiles. Now you have builders, and they get 3 uses.
And then they just disappear?
And then they disappear, and then you have to make more.
I actually really like that.
It's really cool.
It kind of prevents board clutter in a way. That was one of the complaints I had about
there was a whole
Beyond
lot
Earth.
of units and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and it just got to the point where I had so many units on the board that I had to like keep making them perform things or just monitoring them every single turn that I was like, I don't care anymore. There's nothing left to improve.
And then you would set them to like auto features, and then they would start building roads and sucking up all your money, and you're like, stop it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was another thing. Building roads kind of felt weird with workers before. Now, since they only have 3 charges, instead your merchants make roads as they travel because it's a well-worn path.
Right? That's so smart.
All right, so this scouts could end up taking my builder here, which is annoying.
I even going back on that a little bit, I think that's just a good way of like that iteration of design changes just kind of speaks a lot to making units do more intuitive things.
Yes.
So compared to Beyond Earth, which is what I played, it's having the things like the road building is just cumbersome, and it doesn't even really feel fun. So it's good that they kind of changed that up to just make it more of a natural mechanic.
Sorry, I'm just yelling at the mouse here. It's being a pain.
Oh. But yeah, I think that's smart.
So I think, talk about a few last things we were talking about before. It's if I have like weird design choices and stuff like that. Before you had a happiness meter, as you had more population, your level of happiness would go down, and so you're constantly trying to make things to even out your happiness, and like your whole empire would just get sad at once if you went to war or whatever the case is.
And if it got bad enough, you'd have civil war, right?
That you would just start spawning barbarians, and your people start rebelling essentially. Now, each city has its own happiness, and there's a huge balance in that we have enough time to go over. There's a huge balance with cities and their happiness and stuff like that. So, this is kind of the bread and butter of like the game, right? Your cities are the most important thing. That's what the game is about. So you produce culture. We talked about that before. That helps with your civics tree. Then you produce food, and food allows your city to grow. You'll see that I have 2 more turns until it's going to grow. And what that means is I currently have 2 citizens. But if I go to manage citizens, I can see, I can put a citizen here.
So it's like allocation of where they're generating resources.
Precisely. So like if I were like, I don't want this one, I would rather have, well, that's a bad example. These are just both better than everything around me. But like if I were like, oh man, I would rather have more production, and this spot gives me more production while this one gives me more food, I could allocate them over here instead.
But this becomes important too on where you decide to build your cities.
Building cities or where you're going to build them is so much more important than it was in Civ 5.
Yeah.
Civ 5, you just be like, whatever, go here. But in this one, it's like, no, you want to be near a river or a lake or something. You want to be near fresh water.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was super important in Beyond Earth. I actually didn't know that it was that different in Civ 5.
I don't know. I mean, they were fairly similar, but they improved upon it in Beyond Earth. Beyond Earth did some things that were a little, like the military got a little weird, but it improved upon a lot of things that Civ 5 didn't.
That's fair.
So in this one, there's like a little triangle of things that allow you to grow. You have your housing capacity. So I can only have up to 6 people in my city.
People.
Yes, citizens, people that are working things. It's like a nebulous idea. And so if I end up getting one under that capacity, so 5, I slow down growth because people stop filtering into the city, essentially, because there's not enough room for them. So I want to make sure my housing capacity is up. At the same time, I have amenities. And basically, that means how happy they are. If I build like a stadium, then that adds in an amenity because they have some form of entertainment. If I have a luxury resource like incense, for instance, I'll increase my amenities for that city or for an array of cities. And so the more amenities you have, you can counter the unhappiness that you get from having such a huge population.
Gotcha.
As people get crowded, they get unhappy.
And you'd build some of those things with the builder units, right?
Yes. So if when my border expands to claim this, I could have a builder go over here and build it near a plantation on that incense, and then bam, I have that available to me.
Gotcha.
In addition, finally, you have your food. So there's a triangle. I want high food so that I can make more people, but at the same time, I don't want to hit this housing capacity. So I want to make sure I have a lot of housing. At the same time, I want to make sure that my amenities doesn't go below the required number. Otherwise, they get unhappy, and just like in Civ 5, make rebels. Gotcha. So there's that triad. Production's important because it allows you to make things. Obviously,
it's like building materials.
Yeah, it's your workshops and stuff like that, and it's a nebulous idea of how many turns is it going to take me to make a thing. Before it cost me 10 turns. Now it's only cost me 6 turns to make a builder. So there's been advancements. Each city can generate science, which is this tech tree that we're looking at before now. So if you have like 5 cities all generating science, that's obviously better than 1 city generating science.
And that's a resource that's just for progressing technologies.
Yeah, it does nothing but that until the very end if you're trying to go for a science victory. And then what you do is you're just pumping science into trying to make rocket ships and stuff like that.
Okay. That makes sense.
Faith is basically an optional resource that you can choose to generate, and that allows you to make the missionaries and spread your religion that we talked about. And then, of course, you have money. And
is that more for trading and diplomatic things?
It's one of my favorite resources because of how it works. Basically, if I am at my city, right, and I say I want to purchase an item with gold, it would show me how much gold it would cost to purchase it. And if I purchase it, I get it automatically.
Okay.
It won't be able to move until next turn if it's a unit, but I get it automatically versus production, which I'm always generating and is never depleted. However, it takes me time to make things.
I see. That makes sense.
And yeah.
So then generating those resources, are those all things that you generate from your people in the city? Or do you have I assume some of those things require buildings like science or faith, but can you allocate your civilians to those different spots on the tiles and say you had a building that generates science, you have to move your people?
So that has changed drastically since it's the biggest change in probably in any Civ game in the longest while. So now we can make what are called districts. And that we're probably not going to have time to get to that point. We'd have to play a few episodes to get there. But now you can generate districts. And so there are multiple districts, and we can get to them. Kapow, let's go here. All right, so this is our first district available to us. It's a campus, that and astrology. Astrology leads to a holy site. A holy site is a district for producing faith and great prophets. And a campus is the one that produces science and great scientists. And so what you would do is when you build it, you choose this space that it goes onto. So let's say I built a campus right here. So that campus would give me science. It gets an additional science if it's next to a mountain.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, every campus that you build, if they have 2 adjacent campuses or 2 adjacent districts to them, they'll get an additional like science.
Now, do they auto-generate science whether or not you have your civilians on it?
They do.
Okay.
So if it generates 2 by itself, and then let's say an additional 1 because the mountain is generating 3 every turn. However, I can allocate citizens to it to make even more science. So you can go like all out for it. And so that there's the same thing for that, for the campuses, for the holy sites I don't know why I'm pointing here, but holy sites make faith, theater squares make culture. So there's basically one there's a campus for every resource.
So I actually really like that. I think that's worth talking about too, because compare this to other like strategy games, or even real-time strategy games too, because a lot of them function off of similar ideas. A lot of classic ones, was it like Empires or something like that? Rome Total War is probably one of them. You would generally send units out to go chop trees, and you would actually destroy like forest tiles and stuff.
Old RTSs and stuff like that.
Yeah, and they'd like bring them back to the home base. I know this is what's been going on in Civ for a decent while now, but I think it's really smart because it helps automate some of that resource gathering, so the players can focus on some of the more interesting and more complex parts of the game, rather than worrying about the monotonous tasks of allocating characters to go collect resources.
It is definitely not about the micromanagement, not unless you're at war. If you're at war, you want to micromanage where you're moving, but otherwise, it's more just kind of like about the concept.
Yeah, and it's not to say that that micromanagement is bad design. I think there's a time and a place for it. And some of those old strategy games, it makes a lot of sense. And me, even as a player, like I got strange satisfaction from this micromanagement. I actually played a lot of strategy games, not because of the fighting, but because of that. I liked collecting resources. It made me feel good.
And it makes sense. Those games always stressed me the hell out. But the working on an economy, I totally enjoyed. The moment we're going to war and I have to produce a bunch of units, but I'm sorry, but I'm building all these builders. I can't make you fighting units. And Civ, it's like you could take a step back and be like, all right, cool. He went to war with me, but he doesn't have any units barreling down on me for like another 5 turns. At least I can work around that. But then it becomes about the micromanagement. Once war starts, before that, doesn't really matter too much.
What was that strategy game that was based off of Greece? The
Age of Mythology?
Yeah. Age of Mythology was the one I played a lot as a kid, and I remember they let you generate your own maps. I remember I generated one where I walled off the only other player so that they couldn't escape, and it was a land full of trees and rocks, and I just like sat there and let my guys get all the rocks and trees, and it was boring. It was completely boring, but I loved it.
Oh, that game got ridiculous. I remember building a line of towers, like archer towers, at my enemies, and I just pushed a wall on them. And then, even if they were able to breach it, trying to get to my city was just nigh impossible. That game got ridiculous. My favorite unit was the Anubite because they could jump into the air. It was crazy. Anyway,
a great game.
So I just reached a civic. What's it called? I got a government, essentially.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I got the first code of laws. It's the first civic development you can reach. We're about out of time, but I'm going to talk about that in the next episode.
Ooh, cliffhanger.
It's one of my favorite parts about Civ 6. It's so cool. But, question of the day.
So I feel like it would make sense to talk about the automated resource collection. I guess maybe the question is, what are your thoughts on it? What are some of the perks and pros or cons of using that automated system and kind of removing that micromanagement from the gameplay?
Automated versus active, I suppose.
Yeah.
All right. Well, till next time, we'll talk more about it. And
be sure to vote on what you want us to play after this.
Do the thing.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.